Well, hey, Tom, thanks for joining us. Obviously, we met in Hawaii and a lot of things have happened since then. And we know you, but our audience does. So if you could give us a quick synopsis on who you are and RAWN and how it relates to RAWN, Rescue Afghan Women Now. And then I'm going to pour in with some other questions after that.
Sure. My name's Tom. I'm an attorney now based in DC, but prior to relocating to DC, I was in Hawaii, where I co-founded a group called Rescue Afghan Women Now, which is essentially an informal organization that sought to and still seeks to rescue U.S. allies from Afghanistan, from Taliban capture and execution, with a specific focus on extremely high-risk female soldiers. We tend to focus on what are called the Female Tactical Platoon, the FTPs, which is the only all-female special forces group in the former Afghan military, all of whom were trained by and deployed alongside U.S. Special Forces, and about half of whom were able to get manifested out of the country during the evacuation in August of 21. The other, roughly speaking, half were left in Afghanistan and, as you can imagine, are being systematically hunted by the Talibs for both their role in fighting the Taliban and also for their outspoken support for the U.S. mission. So we started this group a couple of years ago, and we've been, going around and trying to gather support from folks in the private sector. So the organization is essentially just 4 people, 3 civilians, including myself, and a Army Reserve officer. And we just sort of started this thing all remotely, and we have had slow but consistent success that has been speeding up in the past couple of weeks with a little bit of good news that I'm happy to speak more about.
Awesome. So, yeah, when we met you, you were really at the beginning of it, and you had told us you were basically a full-time attorney, and then you just stopped doing that. You were just compelled to do that, and which is was quite inspirational to us and motivating to us being beyond the teams and people we're associated with. So we met you, and we tried to get the word out as well with you guys, and then you guys really kind of turned the corner. You had enough to keep the lights on, and then I believe you had an article in the Atlantic Journal, I believe.
Yep.
And that might have been a strategic inflection for you guys. Can you just speak to that a little bit, and then we can go from there?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when we started this out, this organization, at first it was just us individually giving our money, whatever kind of shekels we had in our pocket, and then reaching out to friends and family on sort of a very informal basis. But very quickly we realized that our Afghan allies needed tremendous amounts, but also sustained amounts of aid in many ways, financial just being one of them. And so we started looking to other organizations to see if we could get any sort of support. And just to give a little bit of context to how we operate. So aside from that one founding member of our organization who has military ties, the majority of us are just plain old civilians that have no idea what the heck we're doing. So we sort of learned on the fly. But essentially, we got in touch with every single remaining FTP that was still in the country. And what we would do is make sure that they were safe housed. And then if we had a high degree of confidence that a family would be captured and killed, presumably within 72 hours, we would liaise with certain nonprofit US-based groups, particularly Special Forces veterans groups, that could supply through their networks some kind of in-theater assistance, whether it be a tactical intercept or emergency medical aid, or also safe housing options. If we believe the family was at sort of a very high acute risk, meaning within 72 hours they'd be captured or killed, what we would do is we would essentially liaise with different stakeholders to get that family covertly exfiltrated into a neighboring country. And we do everything legally and above board and completely compliant with all US export regulations like FinCEN and OFAC. And we would basically safe house them outside of Afghanistan while we worked with relevant stakeholders to try to get what are called their Priority 1 refugee admission applications through the US bureaucratic system, which involves folks at DoD as well as at state. That process, as you can imagine, but I didn't at the time, takes a considerable amount of time. Here we are many years later, and finally, these folks are starting to get processed through the US bureaucratic machine. That Atlantic article was critical because we were basically nearing the end of our budgets. We tapped out all of our resources. Some of us cashed in our retirement accounts, and we just kind of realized this is a once in a many lifetime opportunity where you're just faced with a moral decision of will you do the right thing, even if it comes at incredible personal cost. All four of us answered in the affirmative, and we just knew that something had to be done. I mean, I think speaking on behalf of the folks from sort of civilian private sector, there was a real feeling of hopelessness that we couldn't help our allies, and we just refused to do nothing. So we eventually got picked up by the Atlantic, and to tie it all back together, in that article, there's one family that we had exfiltrated into Pakistan while we were awaiting their processing, and they were interviewed by George Packer, who's the journalist, under an alias, and he spoke about them, and they were personally targeted by the head of the intelligence apparatus from the Taliban. And we almost lost that family multiple times, including at a raid that happened at 2 a.m. where the family got rolled, and it's a tremendous ordeal. And long story short, last week they touched U.S. soil, and so it was an absolutely surreal moment, looking at pictures of this family throughout over the course of the past 2 years. There are some times where it seems so inevitable that everyone would be captured and executed, and now here they are in land of the free and home of the brave. So we could not be more ecstatic and more indebted to organizations like Beyond the Teams that have supported us and helped get our message out. Overall, we have a total roster. So we focus on essentially what we consider to be the most high-risk Afghan female populations, all of whom served in the military in one capacity or another, whether they're the FTPs, other facets of the Afghan National Army, or female pilots, or the National Police. And that roster totals about 206 individuals. Some folks come onto our roster at different times. And of those 206, we were able to get the vast majority of them, their paperwork essentially submitted through the right channels with the right US stakeholders. And of that 206, we have, I can say, sort of roughly 20 or so are now safely in US soil, all within the past couple of weeks. We have another, I'll say, rough maybe dozen or so safely in US custody through US installations in Central Asia, as they're waiting to get forward process to get relocated here. We still have the vast majority still in hiding in Afghanistan, and we're in touch with them on a daily basis, and navigating real-time or near real-time threat levels. But things seem to finally be happening. So it's been very much a marathon and not a sprint. And I never thought I'd be doing this sort of work for this long. But to be honest, I also had no idea that we would have any chance of success like we've seen in the past couple of weeks. So our spirits are extraordinarily high. We are committed to get every single last person, man, woman, and child, from our roster safely here into the United States. And it looks like we are slowly entering the end of the tunnel, and we can see the light at the end.
That is absolutely outstanding. I'm hoping you can share some pictures with us. If you can, whatever, I'm not sure how that works. I'm sure you're super aware of the security and safety of people. Anything you could share publicly would be awesome. We could splice that into here. Definitely going to put the website on. You guys are still accepting donations, and I know you guys are moving forward on all that. Conrad, did you want to chime in on this?
Much, just on the fundraising piece, how much does it cost approximately per member to get out of the country? You know, if you're looking at a bit of paperwork and not even talking accommodations, flights, etc. What's it?
Yeah, so the paperwork is zero. And then the actual, once they get kind of cleared to be forward processed, so the typical um, mechanism is their paperwork goes through the US, we'll call it the US bureaucratic system, and then they get cleared, they get contacted, and they have a series of sort of pre-screening interviews. And then at some point, I can't really talk too much about the detail of how it happens, but they get sort of in drips and drabs taken out of Afghanistan for forward processing in a US controlled base. Right. And then from there, everything is taken care of by the US government. So they don't pay for any commercial flights. Where the financing comes into play is for typically medicine, food, emergency safe housing. It's keeping this population alive until they're in sort of US government control and can be forward processed. And those costs, they fluctuate wildly. I mean, there have been times where we were, I can't give any specific figures, but we'd have doubling or tripling of costs within a span of a week, depending, it was in direct proportion to the security concerns, either in places like Pakistan, all throughout Afghanistan. I mean, there have been places in Afghanistan which, as I'm sure you guys are more well aware than I, the north of Afghanistan has been famously anti-Talib traditionally, but there's been times when Mazar seems to have been flipped, and actually northern Afghanistan was more dangerous and more pro-Taliban than other parts that have been historically anti-Talib. So a lot of the costs, we are just reliant on our partners that are working in theater. If they say, look, this safe house is going to cost this much to keep it sort of safe and off the books and away from Talib eyes, then that's what it costs. And so we just kind of do the work, trying to knock on doors of friends and families and churches and synagogues and see, what we can get together to save these extremely vulnerable populations.
So it'd be safe to say that the majority of the monies then go to food, medicine, and housing, security.
Yep.
While we're still in Afghanistan until they get processed.
Yep. I would say I can safely say that's 100%. There's not a single penny that doesn't go directly to food, money, security, housing.
Okay. Awesome.
Any, Tom, so now that you got things moving, and I know it may be completely premature, but any sort of wild guess on, a year, 6 months, 2 years? I mean, any idea? I know it's just kind of a wild question, but based on what you're seeing, let's say it went good, not perfect, not bad, but it went good.
That's a great question. I have no accurate data points from which to formulate any sort of answer with any degree of confidence. That being said, my sort of intuitive gut feeling based off of a lot of amorphous, non-provable data points, I would say within 12 months, we should be in pretty good shape. I think we should be pretty close to getting the majority, if not all, of these folks out. There's a lot of other concerns that, there's so many things that could affect this operation, not least of which the political environment in DC, how much thirst different parts of the government apparatus have to rescuing these people. There's a lot of security things that are outside of obviously our hands and above our pay grades. We don't have any control or say obviously in forward processing or in vetting. So we just try to politely nudge the people that have that authority, make them aware of particular cases if we think that there's a high degree of threat. I mean, I was just this morning, I can say I was working on getting a safe house in Afghanistan for a small handful of P1 applicants, both of whom are members of the FTP and have been nearly captured and killed. I can't even tell you how many times this past year. It's been extraordinary. And just this morning was able to sort of figure out a safe house option actually through some contacts that are, I'll say that are familiar with US stakeholders that operate in this region, generally speaking. So a lot of it is just sort of dealing with things as they come up. This we're learning from the seat of our pants. I will say one other thing in terms of risk. One very significant risk that I didn't fully appreciate until much more recently is actually has nothing to do with Talib threat. It's actually suicidal ideation.
Mhm.
I think the effect of hopelessness is absolutely crushing on the human spirit, and sometimes is the determining factor of whether or not these people are going to have a chance. We've gotten lots of texts when people are very close to the end of their rope and are contemplating suicide. And, the basic stance is, look, we feel like the United States has forgotten us. We're playing a cat and mouse game with the Talibs that we've been successful for 2 years, but we're exhausted. It's just a matter of time. And we're going to be captured and killed anyway. So we might as well, have some control and dignity on how we end this story. And then when we get messages like that, we respond either in English or in our very broken Dari or sometimes Pashto, and say, like, look, there are regular American civilians that have not forgotten you. I'm tracking you. Our team is tracking you. There are many people that empathize with you. Just because you're not hearing from them doesn't mean that there's not great support from our nation. And sometimes just one small message like that is enough to keep people from making a extremely bad decision in the heat of the moment. And so far, I can say we're extraordinarily lucky in the sense that we have not lost a single life on our entire roster since we started this organization, which I don't think is the case for most organizations. We've managed to keep everyone out of Taliban capture and execution. And almost everyone is sort of in the process of, they're within the hands of the government bureaucracy. So they have viable, I can say this as a lawyer, they have viable chances of success for legal entry to the United States. It's just a question of keeping them alive until that process is completed. And to go back to Ken's question, my gut sense is that within a year we should be seeing most of these folks finally out of Afghanistan.
Is there a way to potentially do or has it already been done, a campaign to contact every congressional member on the House Armed Services Committee and also the SASC, and basically almost give a pre-staged letter, pre-formed letter with the issues that basically a guy like me can just sign and send to then just start an awareness campaign, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one big problem that we've faced, unfortunately, over the course of the past 2 years is that the national attention span towards this issue has somewhat fallen short given other international concerns. We saw it first with Ukraine. We see it now with, Gaza, Israel. There's just not a lot of attention that's given by the average person. We've seen it most directly reflected in fundraising because people are giving money to many other causes, and this isn't sort of centralite. That being said, every little bit of public and political awareness, I think, is basically very helpful. What effect that may have is unclear to me. That's a little bit above my pay grade. But my sense is, the more I sort of learn of other folks in the government that are working on this issue, it's so bipartisan. I mean, absolutely every single American wants to see the right thing done.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no reason why the right thing can't get done immediately. And I think our organization is somewhat, I'll say, humble proof that
Right.
a lot of insistence and resilience and just absolute refusal to give up, no matter what the political winds are, will lead eventually to a good result. And so I think we're close to it. I think any kind of letter would be very helpful. And I think, our lawmakers need to be aware that there are still significant swaths of the U.S. that really want to see us do right by our allies and not see them slowly get slaughtered. I think that's a great idea.
I think, because a lot of campaigns you see are go or give or, make aware, and I think the going is not really in the this Kuleana, but we definitely have the opportunity to give and make aware. And I think the awareness, and you've got the success record now of a good percentage of people, and you have a target date where you think it could really. So I think if there's a way to construct that, and then we just send it out to our network and your network, and just one last, one good push might be enough to keep them all safe, fed, and cared for until they all get out. Because, and then when talking to the bureaucrats, going, this is not a perpetual stream of cash or awareness. We can see our success goal made in the next 12 to 18 months with your help.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And it seems to be, the staying the course right now has actually been quite positive, which wasn't necessarily the case a year ago, 2 years ago, where we had no idea if our efforts would be viable at the end of the day, if we would be able to save anyone. But now we have a lot of, like you said, like we have multiple handfuls of data points of people that we were able through our processes to finally get here. And so I think, this isn't, I think if we stay the course as it is, eventually I think we'll be able to get most, if not everyone, out. I think the question is, how can we accelerate that process? Because Afghanistan continues to become very complicated for many reasons. The Talibs are just one of them. Another one, like I mentioned, suicidal ideation and the collapse of the economy. I mean, it's a dark place to be. So I think trying to coordinate efforts to get people out of there as quickly and efficiently and safely as possible, I think, is in everyone's best interest.
Well, awesome, Tom. We'll spread the word best we can. We'll use this medium right here.
Appreciate it.
We'll talk offline on some other things we could do to assist. And anybody who's listening, please jump in. We'll provide the links and maybe some suggestions how you can jump in. Maybe even do a form letter for them, Conrad, and they can contact their representatives. It's always just good to have that weight.
Tom, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and give us a update into what's happening with RAWN, Rescue Afghan Women Now, and also how we can help you help the end target, which is the FTPs and their families getting out of Afghanistan and into a safe harbor. So I really thank you for bringing us up to date. That's really encouraging news, getting the numbers of folks that you are getting out, and the fact that the majority of them are, in fact, got their paperwork going and just waiting. And again, for the people watching out there, really could use help with funds, because your funds go to RAWN 100% to help them get food, shelter, medicines if needed, and security while they're awaiting release or extrication from Afghanistan to our safe harbor.
That's right.
So again, thank you, Tom. Any last words for the group?
No, just thanks to both of you, and thanks to the Beyond the Teams community. I mean, your support has been absolutely critical to our success, and especially the timing of your support. Just getting this message out, I think, is in itself of great use and great benefit to us and to these families, as well as any additional funding that may come. That's obviously very critical as well. But thank you guys for your service you have done and the service that you continue to do in different ways, especially in assisting these very at-risk populations.
Thanks much.
All right. Best, everybody. Thanks again, Tom.
Thanks, guys.
Wow.
Very much. Thank you.